Good afternoon. I'm Congressman John Micah. I'm fortunate to chair the House Subcommittee on Transportation and Public Assets. It is a subcommittee of the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee, the chief investigative and oversight panel in Congress. And pleased to be here. This is a field meeting and examination of some of the major transportation projects in the New York City and Manhattan area. Well, I'm pleased to be joined and acting as our acting ranking member by Mr. DeSaulnier of California, our regular ranking member, Ms. Congresswoman Duckworth, is not able to be with us, two accounts, but we're very pleased that Mark is subbing for her. We've also been joined by the distinguished gentlelady from Manhattan here in New York, Miss Maloney, and we thank her for being with us. And then we're privileged to have in town also and joining us Mr. Sessions, a gentleman from Texas, and he is the chairman of I think Mark said one of the most powerful committees in Congress, the Rules Committee, but he expressed an interest. We're very pleased to have him join us for this meeting of our subcommittee. This is not a formal hearing, but it's a review and oversight of some of the projects that are very important, not only to New York and the people of New York, the taxpayers, but also to the federal government and the United States. With that, the order of business will be, I'll have hopefully a brief opening statement, some background information, and then I'll turn to our acting ranking member and other members for some opening comments. Then we're joined by three witnesses today, and we'll hear from them and their statements, and then we'll have an informal discussion on some of these major infrastructure projects. So I think we all know that New York is the most populated urban area in the United States, financial capital really of not only the U.S. but also the world, and it's absolutely vital to our nation's economy and New York's economy that we have the very best infrastructure and that our infrastructure needs are met here. We are not focusing on all the infrastructure projects at this particular oversight meeting, but we've targeted three major projects, and I'll go into those in just a second. I do want to thank, first of all, Mr. Patrick Foy, who last night spent time with us in the evening with members and staff, who is from the New York Port Authority. We reviewed some of the New York Port Authority's projects, including the Goethals Bridge, which is $1.5 billion. It's a public-private partnership, a major one. The Bayonne Bridge, another $1.5 billion project. And then we also heard a little bit of an update on the $4 billion Transit World Trade Center subway and rail rebuild project, which we didn't get to see this visit, but we will be back for. And then most exciting news in New York was, and Mr. Foy relayed, a $4 billion announcement on LaGuardia to build the central terminal. And that also is a public-private partnership, major projects. So that was last night, and we appreciate those folks giving us that briefing. This morning we had a breakfast meeting, and I want to thank Craig Stewart and Joe Gillette, who actually came from Florida, but it now is up here working with MTA. They briefed us and others from MTA on specifics on their project and actually presented us with a great plan. We'll take that back with us. This is the MTA capital program for 2015 to 2019. That's a 5-year plan, and hold on to your pants, members. It's $32 billion. Is that right, Mark? $32 billion. And they gave us a very detailed report on the various aspects of this project. And then what they're looking for public-private partnership, for state and local contributions, and then also with the federal partners. But a very good briefing. The only problem is the chart on 15, and of the $32 billion plan, there's a $14 billion gap of revenue needed to complete it. So that may be a topic of discussion today. So with the New York Port Authority and MTA, we thank them for spending time with us today. Just prior to this session opening this afternoon, we got a chance to go down and look at one of the three major projects. I think I've followed it for at least 10, 12 years. But the biggest project in New York, and probably the biggest in the nation, is East Side Access. And the East Side Access is just mammoth in its size and impact. It encompasses the work of multiple locations: Manhattan, Queens, the Bronx. Includes 11 miles of tunneling starting over at the Long Island Railroad down 63rd, and then under and to Grand Central Station, where we are. And I thank the members and staff who went down there today. They cleaned up very nicely afterwards. But I think it's important that everyone see that. It's very impressive. And when it's complete in one day, it'll serve over 160,000 people. And our ultimate goal, too, is a connection all the way to JFK to service that airport. In fact, Mr. Foy said we might be looking in the future at another runway there, additional runway. We don't have much more capacity at Newark, and we certainly have none unless we put it in the water we have the choice of putting it in the water at LaGuardia, or we could put it on the New Jersey Turnpike, another runway in Newark. But unfortunately, the cost of two of these major projects, the second one I'll talk about is the Second Avenue subway, but that project we'll visit tomorrow. And unfortunately, the two projects are both East Side Access and Second Avenue subway are both significantly behind schedule and very much over budget. And that's going to be the topic of some of our conversation today. But Second Avenue subway is the first addition to the subway in 60, 70 years or more. Needs to be done. We have $1.3 billion in federal money contributed to that. I've stood at one of the re-access points with Ms. Maloney some time ago. We've tried to assist with federal funding and be good partners. It is a major project, but it also is a major project of concern when the cost overrun. There's a great chart in here the staff prepared. Where's that one that shows, guys, the cost overruns? Do you have an extra one we could bring up? But I want to make sure everybody gets a copy of that. We've detailed when these projects started. This is the little chart. Make sure every member up here has a copy of this. East Side Access was started way back, April 2006. It's not scheduled now to be completed until December 2022. Second Avenue, and it was started out at $6.4 billion. It's now reaching almost $11 billion. I'll say 10.8 just to be fair. That's the current estimate. The Second Avenue subway started in 2007. It won't be finished till next year, hopefully. It's 82% complete, and that went from 3.8 to 4.5 billion. Second Avenue subway, and this portion is just the first phase. There's a second phase to this project. It's estimated to cost right in the same neighborhood. Now, with that tough news on two huge projects, multi-billion-dollar projects, there's some relatively good news on the Moynihan Station. It's a much smaller project, $267 million of because the initial cost is only up to $300 million. We've got quite a bit of federal money in, I think at least $150 million. It is expected to be done next year. Got to look at it. But this project actually was started back in October of 2010, and it took some time to get us to this stage. That's what we'll visit tomorrow on our way out after 2nd Avenue subway. So again, we have two major mega projects behind schedule and over budget. And we've got the Moynihan Station, which is very important, just a few miles from here, that connects and will service also Penn Station. But it is absolutely critical that we complete these projects. It's absolutely imperative that Congress knows what our expected commitment is to make certain that these come online. And it's also our responsibility to go back and see where the cost overruns. We discussed briefly some Inspector General review and also internal audit reviews. And there is some tough information contained in that. If people have abused the process, we will see that those folks are held accountable. But we also want to make certain that the projects are done and that we now have a new schedule and we try to keep that. So today we're going to hear from FTA, the Federal Transit Administration. We're going to hear from the Inspector General of the U.S. Department of Transportation, a little bit of information. We're also privileged to have the major senior advisor for the Mayor of New York on infrastructure with us, and I'll introduce them shortly. So with that, I thank everyone for attending. It's a little bit lengthy, but it provides you with some background as to where we've been, where we are, and where we need to go with these important New York and national infrastructure mega projects. I'll now yield to our ranking acting member.
You almost said Yankee.
On-
I sort of am. I grew up in Boston, so please forgive me. I was a lifetime Red Sox fan before I became a Giants fan. But I remember coming to New York in my youth, and I think it was some of my colleagues came down here because the drinking age was lower than the New England states, and the memory of the Port Authority terminal still haunts me at a certain ambiance in the 70s. I just want to thank Chairman Micah. It was yet last night and this morning was really remarkable, and Mr. Sessions mentioned this in aside, how much the chairman cares about transit and transportation. Of course, his legacy is nationally known, and his depth of knowledge was fun just to sit and listen to you. So, and then I got to be exposed to his sense of humor 100 feet down in the Manhattan Stone. So I'm particularly grateful to be here and be part of this. Also am interested because although I've only been in Congress for 5 months, I've been in transportation in the Bay Area for a long time, having served on the Metropolitan Planning Organization there for 10 years, and then I chaired both committees in the upper and lower house in the state legislature. And we spent a lot of time, because California is looking at many more mega projects, but at the same time as we suffer the same challenges we do on a federal level, but probably a little more acute because our fleets turned over so much to get funding, not just for transit, for transportation systems. So you have this conundrum. Our Constitution requires a supermajority to raise taxes, and our ability to do that is based on our ability to deliver projects on time and on budget. And when we have a project like the eastern span of the Bay Bridge, it's the second busiest toll bridge in the United States, and it's 10 years late and 6 times over budget, it's sort of hard to go out to voters and say, we want you to raise your taxes. So there is a common theme, though, I think. We had Cambridge University speak to us in California about a survey they did on all mega projects around the industrialized world, and there's a lot of commonality. So I think we can learn from you, then we can invest more effectively and get the confidence of the public behind these big projects. And then lastly, just to my 2 other colleagues, being here in New York, we realize how important your investments, if they're going to be right for the whole country, having members from all around the country, it's important that if you do it right, the rest of the country will follow. So appreciate being here and look forward to hearing your testimony.
Thank you so much. Let me yield to the gentlelady from New York, Ms. Bernard.
Well, I am thrilled that you're here, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to the district that I am privileged to represent. And I certainly thank my good friend and colleague, Mark. We were so thrilled when he got elected, and he's a strong voice in Congress for mass transit and really urban needs in our country in general. And Chairman Micah has really been a leader and supporter for transit. And the two projects that we have that have received over $4 billion in federal funds, he's been a strong champion for them. The Second Avenue Subway has received all of its $1.3 billion in federal funding. We are been guaranteed the results of which is due from the state government. So that project will be completed. Now, the FTA has told me that the best work that they've seen in this country comes from the MTA. And so I want to publicly thank them for their professionalism and their real attention to detail, and for putting forward good architectural plans and engineering plans that have helped move these incredibly important projects forward. As the MTA points out, over a third of all of the transit riders in America are here in this great city. Transit is a huge success in New York, and the FTA predicts that on day one, the Second Avenue Subway will move well over 300,000 New Yorkers, huge amounts of people. And the reports that we've seen is that our transit is really overburdened. More people are traveling transit in New York since the 1950s. There is a limit to how many people you can shove into the Lexington Avenue Subway, is one who rides it. And so this Second Avenue Subway is really critically needed. And I notice each year the lines during rush hour get longer and longer and longer. Now there is a dispute between the FTA and the MTA. That's why I pointed out why the FTA was saying such respectful things about the MTA. Now, I'm going to bet on the MTA. The MTA says that this will be built by December 2016. And that's what I've been telling my constituents. So I hope that you will not be putting this off as you have before, and that you will be able to complete this deadline. Now, the FTA is predicting it's going to be in February of 2018. So my question is, how can they be so separate? How can they be so different? The predictions, it's not a month or two, it's a significant amount. And I do want to note that listening very hard to this hearing is someone who's critical to anything that happens in our funding and future, and that is Chairman Sessions, who is the chairman of the Rules Committee, which every single piece of legislation before Congress goes through. So he has honored us with his presence, and I want to thank him very much. Also, the East Side Connector is incredibly important. It will not move as many people as the Second Avenue Subway, but it was critical to the economic development of New York City. Workers are overcrowded. They can't get to New York. The LIRR is at complete capacity, and this will allow us to move more from the Bronx, Queens, into the business district, and it is critical for our economic development and our future. I do want to thank my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, and particularly Republicans, since they are the majority party now, for their support for high-speed rail between New York and Boston, and over $300 million we secured. I was proud to have worked hard on achieving that for the Herald interlocking, which took three major lines, rail lines that were a jammy, it was just blocked. There was too much traffic, and straightened these lines out in anticipation, not only for efficiency for today, but planning for the future of high-speed rail in our country. I want to publicly go on record in supporting public-private partnerships. It has been pointed out in the work of Chairman Micah's committee that the East Side Corridor, or the East Corridor, is the most profitable in the United States. Amtrak always makes profits there, huge profits. And this is an area where high-speed rail would make money. And I believe that public-private partnerships could move forward. Personally, I think it's a national disgrace that the country that created the highway system, created mass transit, created the best transportation system in the entire world, is now woefully behind Europe, India, China, all major industrialized countries in terms of high-speed rail. And when you study their high-speed rail systems, where they have put them in effect, it has grown their economy, made it more efficient, made it easier for people to get to work and to get home and bless the quality of life. And I hope that we can get a task force working for the East Coast corridor, for high-speed rail, first between New York and Boston, major business districts, and then through to Washington. Every economist says that this would be a successful project. We should change the law. We have to change the law in New York State. Governor Cuomo has told me that he would support a change for public-private partnerships. And I have expressed to Chairman Micah that I would support legislation for public-private partnerships on the national level when it can be proved that they can efficiently be an economic engine and create jobs and create the economy in our country. If we're not moving forward, we're going backwards. So these two major projects are critically important. They are the first major subway projects in the entire country in 60 years and will greatly increase the efficiency, the economy, grow jobs, and help this whole region work in a more efficient way, which of course will help the whole country. So I really want to thank very much the chairman, not only for his visit today, but for his consistent support for these major projects that are so important to the economy of our country. And he's not even from New York, yet he's here. But he's here supporting us, and I just want to thank all of them so very, very, very much. The New York City subway hit a record high of 6 million riders per day. Now that's a lot of people, and that's a successful subway system. So I for one, want to thank the MTA for their dedication and hard work. And I certainly hope that they have a story that tells us today that we are going to be opening the 2nd Avenue subway on December 2016, as I have been promised for years. Now, if that is slipping, then we got to work out how we're going to make that change and make sure that we are living up to our promises and our hard work and our professionalism, that we can get this done on time. And I was hoping under budget. So I want to hear the testimony today, and I'm thrilled to be here. And I apologize. I just got out of the hospital, so I didn't think I could go slugging around the subway system. And if I get into a pain feeling, I will have to leave. But anyway, thank you so much. I'm so honored you're here. Your presence has inspired us, and New York wants to figure out how to say thank you and how we can work with you to help the rest of the country get better mass transit. And certainly New York, I'm very proud of the work you've done to move 6 million people a day. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of commerce. That's a lot of efficiency. And it's a lot of protection that you have to put out there for people. So I'm thrilled.
Thank you, Ms. Maloney, and we appreciate your being with us and your commitment to transportation and infrastructure in New York. Let me recognize the chairman of the Rules Committee who's joined us, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Sessions.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, and to my colleagues who are here, thank you very much for not only inviting me, Mr. Chairman, but also for the opportunity to be with Ms. Maloney in her home district. As chairman of the House Rules Committee, we have the responsibility for taking all legislation and making sure it gets to the floor and that it passes. I think it's no surprise that we are attempting, not only as a member of Republican leadership, are we attempting to push a bill that would be a long-term transportation bill out of the committee and to the Rules Committee and to the floor, but we're attempting to work to make sure that we can sustain more funding. We're, as you know, we're about $110 billion off that mark right now, and in order for for us to get the revenue that is necessary over the next few years, it will require a bipartisan effort on behalf of members of Congress. And part of me being here today, not just because the chairman asked me to be here, but is to make sure that I'm looking out for the things which are necessary to push this to all members across the country, and this is an important time for me to do that. I think it's important for me to understand that the need to finalize our work on transportation bills is something that all parts of this country need. I'm from Dallas, Texas, and we've had an influx in North Texas of several 100,000 new residents. And while we are not in a circumstance where we have subways or the type of transportation that you have necessarily in New York along the West Coast or East Coast, we do have our own needs also. In Texas, California, Florida, New York, all need a chance to compete. And we're here actually for large-scale transportation projects. And our ability as members of Congress to effectively hear from our three witnesses today will give us an opportunity for us to make sure that they know we're serious about the dollars that we're going to put behind this, and we're wanting you equally be serious about giving us the facts, the data points, and the information to where proper decisions can be made for all of us. And I want to thank all three of our witnesses for their public service, not only to the federal government, but also to this awesome city of New York City. And I hope you'll tell the mayor that, in fact, 4 members of Congress showed up today because we think New York City is darn important and equally not just a part of the transportation needs, but what the United States of America that makes us a great nation. So I thank each of you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back my time.
Thank you, and thank you again for joining us today. Now what we'll do is turn to our 3 witnesses, and we have 3 gentlemen have joined us. And the order that I'll call on them, I'll call first Mr. Matthew Welbys, and he's Executive Director of the Federal Transit Administration, U.S. Department of Transportation. Then I'm going to call on Mr. Joseph Comey, and he's Deputy Principal Assistant Inspector General, Auditing and Evaluation, U.S. Department of Transportation, Office of Inspector General. And then we're very pleased and honored to have the Senior Advisor to the Mayor for Recovery, Resiliency, and Infrastructure, Mr. William Goldstein. And we'll have him follow our 2 federal witnesses. So with that, first, let me recognize, and if you want to kind of summarize your remarks, any way you'd like to do this, Mr. Welby's first. And if you have other information you want us to take back and make part of the record of this meeting, we will be glad to do that. So, Mr. Welby's, welcome, and you're recognized. I'm sorry, you're Welby's and you're Comey. So we're going to go with Welby's first.
Okay. Thank you. Chairman Micah, members of the subcommittee, guests, thank you for the invitation to join you here today. For over a century, the New York City region has been bound together by its public transportation systems more than any other place in this country. And the ambition and ingenuity behind mega projects back in the late 19th and early 20th centuries really set a course for progress, allowing this region to thrive. And because of past public transportation investments, people in the New York City region today make an average of more than 220 transit trips per person each year. That's nearly double the next closest metropolitan region in the United States, and it's well above the national average. To maintain and build on the vitality of public transportation in this great region, we must do 2 things. We must both reinvest in public transportation and expand public transportation in the New York City region and across the country. First, we must reinvest in existing public transportation infrastructure. There are many public transportation providers in the New York City region, and if we add up the value of all the public transportation tracks, stations, tunnels, buses, rail cars, and other assets, the total is over $500 billion, and that's greater than any other group of FTA grantees. Our ability to leverage the value of that investment is at risk today, and this is because of a significant backlog in maintenance repairs. This is a well-known story. The DOT's most recent Conditions and Performance Report to Congress found an $86 billion maintenance and backlog nationwide for rail, and public transit bus assets. And that's a backlog that's growing by $2.5 billion each year at current investment rates. So there's a real need to reinvest in safe and reliable public transportation here in New York City and around the country. But we also know that our nation's population is growing. And DOT's Beyond Traffic report highlights that our population will increase 25% in the next 30 years. If we try to squeeze 25% more people onto already crowded rail cars and buses at rush hour, it simply can't be done. And so the second thing we have to do to keep this region moving is to expand public transportation services. FTA helps do this through our Capital Investment Grant Program, more commonly referred to as the New Starts and Small Starts Program. And the New Starts program has existed for nearly 40 years, and it has a notable track record of success, supporting the construction of over 100 rail projects and bus projects and 1,000 miles of bus and rail systems around the country. This includes a number of transformative projects here in the New York City region in the past, such as the Queens Boulevard Connector and the Hudson-Bergen Light Rail Line. During the past 5 years, FTA has had a portfolio of 37 New Starts projects under construction, with a total cost of $51 billion. Two of the most transformative projects are the East Side Access Project and the Second Avenue Subway Phase 1 project. Many superlative phrases could be used to describe and capture the benefits these projects are going to deliver. The East Side Access Project is going to carry Long Island Railroad lines to Grand Central Terminal, nearly doubling peak hour tunnel capacity and speeding travel for at least 160,000 people's trips each day. And the Second Avenue Subway Phase 1 project is going to add an additional north-south transit connection on the east side of Manhattan. It's going to relieve the congestion on the Lexington Avenue line, and that line is the busiest transit line in North America. It has severe overcrowding on the stations and the platforms and the stairways, and as was noted, more than 200,000 daily trips are forecast when the line opens. These are the two largest New Start transit projects FTA has ever funded. And along with the benefits to transit users, which are notable, the project has faced challenges uncommon in FTA's New Starts portfolio. When FTA and the MTA signed the full funding grant agreement for the East Side Access Project in 2006, the project was estimated to cost $7.4 billion, with $2.6 billion coming from FTA's New Starts program. Today, FTA is working with the MTA to confirm and update the revised increased cost estimate and delayed revenue service date schedule. When the Second Avenue Subway Phase 1 project, FFGA, was signed in 2007, the project was estimated to cost $4.9 billion, with $1.3 billion coming from the FTA's New Starts program. Today, back in March, we have amended the full funding grant agreement with the MTA, and there's a revised cost estimate of $5.57 billion, and an opening date forecast by the MTA that's at least 2 years later than the original FFGA. It is important to note that for both these projects and all FTA full funding grant agreement projects, our federal funding from the Capital Investment Grant Program does not increase. All the cost overruns must be covered by the local project sponsor. Through FTA's Project Management Oversight Program, we have closely monitored the MTA's management of these two projects, and with FTA staff and our oversight contractor experts on site performing continuous review and evaluation intended to identify, mitigate, and manage risks which could cause delays or cost increases. We coordinate closely with the MTA in this work, and we look forward to the successful delivery of these critical transit investments. We might expect that a century from now, people will appreciate and benefit from the ambition and ingenuity behind the East Side Access and Second Avenue Subway Phase 1 projects, and they will recognize how these investments continue to course for progress, allowing this region to grow and thrive. I want to thank you for the opportunity to join you today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, and we'll turn next to our other federal witness, Mr. Joseph Comey, and he's a Deputy Inspector General with the U.S. Department of Transportation. I understand you just celebrated a birthday, so we're glad you made it live long enough to join us today.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Thank you for inviting me to discuss federal oversight of major transportation projects in the New York area with you and your fellow members. Our office has conducted numerous audits and investigations related to transportation projects over the years, with frequent focus on those in the New York area, as well as other assessments of DOT's oversight of federal infrastructure investments. Given FTA's significant portfolio of federal funded projects in the New York area, East Side Access, Second Avenue Subway. Let me highlight FTA's efforts and touch on other DOT agencies as well, which support projects in the New York area and which, apply to your broader oversight mission. So FDA, in our view, has taken steps to address the cost overruns and schedule delays experienced with projects in New York, such as working with MTA to develop improved project execution plans for the East Side Access project, and showing a willingness to place restrictions on awarded funds given delays and cost overruns. Despite these actions, our prior work points to the following opportunities and principles for further improving FTA's oversight activities. First, FTA must take full advantage of existing oversight tools and resources. Chief among these are its project management and financial oversight contractors, the PMOCs and the FMOCs, like Matt mentioned. These review individual projects and identify projects' risks and financial capacity. Our prior reviews have identified instances where grantees had not sufficiently addressed major risks that PMOCs identified. Thus, following through on PMOC, FMOC findings and recommendations, as well as those which come from other sources such as procurement system reviews, is critical, and FDA should be ready to exercise its own oversight role where appropriate, in addition to the contractor's work. Secondly, FTA must bolster agreements and coordination among stakeholders and resolve coordination issues. In particular, stakeholders need to establish and clearly document who will be responsible for cost overruns. A lack of such agreements was a significant barrier for New Jersey ARC project and was also a risk when we reviewed Phase 2 of the Dulles Metro Rail project in DC. Since a number of the New York projects will not be completed for some time, there's still opportunity for FTA to oversee stakeholder agreements and work to resolve coordination issues. A specific example in New York, of course, is completion of the amendment to the full funding grant agreement on the East Side Access project. A challenging task, I'm sure, but finishing that will make sure everyone's monitoring to the same set of costs and schedule. Finally, FTA must continue to pay attention to strengthening controls for identifying and preventing fraud, one of the major risks that New York's transportation projects face. Since 2010, our office has conducted 31 FTA grant fraud investigations that resulted in 201 criminal, civil, or administrative penalties. About a third of those cases involved allegations of related to disadvantaged business enterprises, or DBE fraud. Several of those New York projects alone resulted in $29 million being returned to the federal government. Other fraud schemes that our investigators have identified involved embezzlement, false statement, kickbacks, and more. We've received good cooperation from FTA in these investigations, but on the audit side, we've been pushing more for stronger programmatic oversight and proactive efforts in the DBE field. Continuing to strengthen controls to identify and report on DBE and other fraud, and to share information on bad actors so that they do not commit the same crimes elsewhere, is critical to help ensure proper stewardship of taxpayer dollars. Finally, outside of FTA, our work also points to opportunities for improving oversight with projects administered by the Federal Railroad Administration and the Federal Highway Administration. The Federal Highway Administration has agreed to strengthen controls for verifying that there is a reasonable assurance of sufficient toll-based financing, an issue we found with some of their financial planning. FRA has agreed to carry out improvements on documenting its high-speed rail grant award and amendment decisions and tracking and documenting corrective actions taken by grantees. Going forward, we will continue to brief Congress and the Department on our work and on actions needed to prevent fraud, waste, and abuse and improve DOT oversight. This concludes my short statement. I would be happy to answer any
Okay,
questions.
and we'll come back to you as soon as we've heard from our final witness. And last but not least, in representing the mayor of New York City is Mr. William Goldstein. So thank you again for being with us and helping lead a great city, and we're anxious to hear your comments today.
Sure. Thank you, Congressman Micah, members of the committee, and Congressman Sessions. So good morning, good afternoon. My name is Bill Goldstein, and I'm the senior advisor to Mayor de Blasio for recovery, resiliency, and infrastructure. Based on my current and past experience in government in the New York City area, I've seen the strains on the city's infrastructure and the region's infrastructure grow over the years, and the need for investment become even greater. The city's economic success is built on the backbone of its transportation infrastructure. The remarkable growth of the city in the 1990s and the 2000s would not have been possible without the huge investments made by the city, the state, and the federal governments to make the subways, buses, and bridges of the city clean, safe, and reliable. The city and state are continuing to invest, but federal funding is a critical piece to ensuring New York City has the resources necessary to continue as a national and global hub of community, culture, and commerce. And demand for our infrastructure is high and growing. New York City boasts its highest population ever, 8.4 million residents, and is anticipated to grow by over 500,000 new residents over the next 25 years. The entire region will grow by 1.7 million people by 2040. This population growth has had a major impact on our transportation network. Between 2007 and 2011, bicycle commuting has doubled and continues to grow. Freight volume in the region is projected to increase by 48% over the next 2 decades. And the city's transit system, which keeps millions of people on the move every single day, is experiencing record high ridership. The subways are at the highest ridership since the 1950s, and many lines are at or over capacity during rush hour. In 2014, New York City ridership hit a high of 6 million riders per day, as Congresswoman Maloney mentioned. And although New York City does not oversee the MTA, the MTA is an authority, it's a state agency, we recognize its vital importance to the city, and we strive to work cooperatively with the MTA. The city's laid out its own transportation priorities in One NYC, and in this plan, Mayor de Blasio presents a bold vision for a growing, sustainable, and resilient and equitable city, including improving access to underserved areas, increasing capacity on congested transit lines, improving the condition of our roads and bridges, and improving safety through Vision Zero, and enabling the average New Yorker to reach 25% more jobs within 45 minutes by public transit. And in this plan, we also highlight our critical support for crucial projects which have a regional significance. And to meet these goals, we must work cooperatively with the partners at all levels, including the federal level. So the city's transportation infrastructure, estimated at well over $1 trillion in assets between the transit system, the city's 6,000 roadway miles, and 789 bridges that serve the region's millions of motorists and businesses, and ferries that carry 65,000 riders per day, needs ongoing investment and expansion. Currently, transportation projects in New York City receive approximately $1.4 billion in federal highway and transit funds every year. These funds are used for MTA subway and bus maintenance and improvements, bus rapid transit routes, Vision Zero safety improvements, the Staten Island ferry system, and road and bridge repairs. And for New York City DOT, federal funding accounts for approximately 25% of their capital commitments, with the remaining 75% coming largely from the city. But investment hasn't kept up with demand, and federal funding has been flat since 2009, and it has come in short-term patches, including the current 2-month extension that expires in July. So lack of increased long-term federal funding means investment in our infrastructure will continue to fall behind and may stall key projects, many of which are in the plan that Chairman Micah mentioned. The next phase of the 2nd Avenue subway, connecting Metro North to Penn Station, an expansion of the subway line on Utica Avenue in Brooklyn, and the Woodhaven Cross Bay Boulevard select bus service. And we are doing what we can locally. Over the past 10 years, we've increased capital commitments to roads and bridges by 50%. The 2016 executive budget of the city includes even more funds for roads, bridges, and transit. The city's contribution to the MTA 5-year capital plan increased to $657 million, which complements other city investments in the MTA, such as $200 million from the Vanderbilt corridor rezoning, which is right in the area that we're sitting right now, and approximately $1 billion a year in operating expenses. The 10-year capital plan for the city also includes $12.6 billion to grow transportation infrastructure, including $7.8 to restore and rehabilitate bridges, and $1.6 billion for road resurfacing. While there's an undoubted need for increased investment, we recognize the need to make existing dollars stretch further, and to this end, the city's reviewing its own processes for design, construction, and procurement for opportunities to improve project delivery. We're lobbying state government right now for legislation that will allow the city to use the design-build project delivery method. Design-build was successfully piloted in New York City on the ARA-funded project to reconstruct the intermodal facility at the ferry terminal in Staten Island. That project was delivered on budget and significantly quicker than would have been the case under our usual restricted practice of design-bid-build. We would like to benefit from the advantage of design-build in the future, and we hope that our partners in the state legislature agree. So let me sum up. Without a strong federal partner, the twin demands of maintaining existing infrastructure and preparing for future transportation needs are beyond local means. Mayor de Blasio has joined a bipartisan group of mayors around the country to call on Congress to meet our transportation needs. And I thank the chairman for his attention to this issue, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, and we'll get right to that because we want to give everybody an opportunity for this discussion and sort of review of where we are. Now, we've got the two major projects, the East Side Access, Second Avenue Subway. According to my calculations, we're going to be $4.4 billion over budget. It was $6.4 billion on East Side Access, $1.6 billion over on the Second Avenue Subway. That's about right, gentlemen?
Yeah.
Right, that's what we have here. Now, the mayor's representative said, Mr. Welby's, that there's been some delay in federal money. Have they gotten all of their federal money? I thought they got all of their federal money on at least one of the projects.
Second Avenue, I thought, had
All the federal money has been appropriated for the East Side Access project, so $1.3 billion in New Starts funds.
East
Excuse me,
Side.
for Second Avenue Subway.
Second
So
Avenue.
Second Avenue Subway.
They have
received-
it, or it's on its way, or it's appropriate?
It's been appropriated. While we were working with the MTA to finalize the amended full funding grant agreement, which was finalized
Right.
in March, we did hold some of those funds until we were confident with the MTA that the revised
How long did it
cost
take to amend that?
we worked with the MTA for at least a year to affirm the numbers. We want to be sure when we sign an amended full funding grant agreement that the cost and the schedule are locked
But that
down.
was giving them more than originally
No.
requested, or the same amount?
So back in 2007, when we finalized the federal commitment for
Yeah.
Second Avenue Subway, the federal commitment was $1.3 billion, and that is the
Yeah.
total amount that will be received.
So
from
that's
Second Avenue
not
Subway.
changed.
That has not changed.
But they do not have that money, all that money yet?
There are remaining funds for FY 14 and 15 to be obligated.
Approximately how much?
It's about $400 million.
That's a significant
It
amount.
is a significant amount. Our grantees have the ability to spend against those funds
Yeah.
even before they're obligated.
Well, I just got through with a much smaller project, and well, this is FRA, and they kept moving the goalposts. We still haven't signed the damn full funding agreement, and that was supposed to be last fall, and minor changes take forever with the federal government. But I think the mayor's representative raises a point. I mean, Congress is not the only one that's a poor performer, because we've been operating under CRs and hiccups, and I've been up here when the project was about to close a couple of times because we hadn't acted. But we've got to make certain that we get that money to these folks. Again, you say the money is appropriated, but now the other thing too is that's a $6 billion shortfall on two projects. That's big money, and then that's even in Texas, that's big money. But I was told by your representatives of MTA and also the Port Authority too, they're working on some of this, but that there'll be no further requests for federal funds, that they will meet the difference. Are you prepared to meet the difference, Representative the Mayor, of the $6 billion shortfall?
I'm not sure which shortfall.
Well, it's 4.4 for
Oh.
East Side access.
Well, the city, I should
And then
be, yeah.
1.6, but
Right.
city, state, someone,
Right.
other than the
This-
federal government. Because
Right.
we're here to see, well, how the federal money is spent. And then I'm trying to make certain, if you haven't
Right.
gotten your federal money, that you
Right.
get your federal money in a timely fashion, which you obviously
Right.
haven't gotten, or we wouldn't be
Right.
here.
No.
And then there's a shortfall of $6 billion. I don't mind representing the people of the United States in major projects, but when they run significantly over budget, you got 59% of one done, and I guess you got 82% of the second one done. There's still a shortfall
Right.
that's significant, $6 billion. That's going to be taken care of by somebody, other
Right.
than the federal government.
Right. So, as I mentioned in my testimony, the MTA is a separate authority
Right.
from, and is not managed, the city does not run these projects or manage the MTA. We have 4 members on the board. And the city does contribute to the MTA
Right.
capital plan, and we are committed to contributing to the future capital plan. So, I really can't speak for the MTA
But
as
you're
a
not
whole.
coming back, that you know of, or anyone from New York or MTA to ask for more federal money, are you? Have they asked for any?
They have
well,
not. When FTA executes a full funding grant agreement
That's
with
it.
the MTA, the terms of the agreement state that our federal contribution
Is
is
fi-
maxed out.
is fixed,
now. And the project sponsor, in exchange for our
Right.
funds, the project sponsor
Well,
has to deliver.
So even
the
if they ask,
project.
they ain't gonna get it.
That's correct.
Okay. Well, again, that's what we were told today, and you can't speak on behalf of everyone. You
Right.
got 4 representatives on it, and the $6 billion is short. It's gonna have to be met to complete these 2 projects. 4.4 on the East Side access and 1.6 billion there. Now, you said, Mr. Tomei, that there were 221 cases of fraud, contract violations. How much was fraud? How much was contract violations? And how many people went to jail? Anybody, or was it just,
I don't know the exact breakout, but I can get you that information.
I think if you could give it to the committee, I'd just like to put that in the record of the meeting today. But you said you recovered 29 million.
For just three of the significant DBE fraud cases, we recovered 29 million.
But there was more money recovered, you think?
There have been other recoveries.
I
Other
think that it'd be
DBE cases.
important to put in this part of the proceedings, just if you could, and staff, if we could follow up with a letter and just ask them. And you saw DVE fraud was one of the.
Correct, that's about a third of the cases. and
Really?
It's a significant proportion of our cases across.
Would that warrant anything that we should look at for changing the law or the enforcement, the penalties, anything? Or it's just people are using that as a mechanism to defraud on these
Yeah,
projects?
Where we'd like to see the department take stronger action is making clear to the states and to people who run these programs what exactly the rules are. Education efforts could be increased, and as in a number of areas, these should be risk-based efforts, so people know that there's actually a risk that somebody's gonna show up at a job with boots on the ground to check up on the adequacy of the DBE contract, or if the prime is falsifying records. As I said, we've generally had good cooperation. Once somebody drops a dime on somebody, and we're investigating a case, but we're looking for sort of actions across departments and with the other operating administrations to improve the management of this program.
Well, also, we heard finally that we heard a lot of endorsement for design build, that part of, we met with some of the people who've been with the project, the professionals and technical people, and we heard from them support for going to design build. They said they designed it, they put it out, and prices escalated. And then for public-private partnerships also, since we don't have all the funds sometimes to put into these, we can get good partners. So you pretty much would support that, Mr. Comey, Mr.
We
Weeble?
haven't looked at, we haven't looked at these projects and their use of design build in other work we've done with, recently, we talked to people in the Federal Highway Administration that were managing projects with over 500 million. We asked them, and they fully supported the MAP 21 initiatives related to accelerating project delivery with issues like design build. I guess my only sort of audit or skepticism would be that at times, to the degree you come up with more innovative techniques, you may have to adjust your risk assessment techniques also so that you can keep track of the risks that may develop in a project that doesn't fall in as distinct phases as say projects did in the past.
Now, we're talking about huge overruns here. Are you continuing your audit and oversight responsibilities? You going back on any of this? You through?
Our plans right now, and we're always open to further suggestions from the department and Congress, but we redeployed our resources from looking at East Side access to look at some Hurricane Sandy matters across the board, and we will continue to be looking at FTA-wide oversight of large transit projects, because we really think that that's a good way for us to help them sharpen their tools so that, a 1% improvement in efficiency on their oversight translates into a lot.
We're coming back for Sandy. So, this is just the first run, but we haven't gotten into that. Mr. Welby's, anything you want to add?
We, when it comes to the DB issue, we do work up front to train our grantees through the National Transit Institute, through outreach we do to them as they're preparing for oversight reviews. But then we do deploy teams on a regular basis to do DB oversight reviews where we sit down with our grantees.
Are you the ones that discovered this, or was it the IG?
In
Any of these cases?
There are cases that FTA has brought to light through its reviews. There are cases that are reported directly to the IG, and then we coordinate with them. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that answers some of my questions. We may have some more, and we may submit them, but I want to give everybody a chance. Mr. Desagne?
Just to follow up on the chairman's last question and something Mr. Comey brought up. So these DBEs, my impression was that there was a concern that some of these DBEs were either the same people or the principals, or they were using the same methods in other parts of the country. Did I misread what you were saying, Mr. Comey?
One of the concerns we had was with, in the course of some investigations with, as we mentioned in our statement, FTA pointed out that MTA wasn't always as upfront as they could have been in providing us information on these cases. When that occurs, we don't have the opportunity to then take actions in terms of suspensions and debarments and other things against them for other areas. However, as pointed out in my statement, we believe we've worked to improve that coordination with MTA.
Mr. Welby, it strikes me this would be a good place for you to help different states and regions. Do you, not just DBEs, but if you have subcontractors who have had prior history, do you alert states or regions that somebody's either in a do not work with list or?
Right. So the FTA, we don't own a bus or a train. We don't own construction equipment.
Right.
But our grantees do let contracts to firms, and so when our grantees are letting contracts, the firms are supposed to identify that they are certified disadvantaged business enterprises, and those firms are responsible to abide by those agreements. And so Mr. Comey is highlighting there are a number of instances, particularly ones that have been identified in the New York area, where that's a challenge. So we do work with our grantees. It's a departmental regulation on disadvantaged business enterprise utilization, but we work with our grantees so that they're aware of the requirements, and that when they go out and contract, they know how to take advantage of the DB opportunities, but to not be taken advantage of.
So not just for DBEs, but if you know somebody is a subcontractor on big projects that has routinely been a problem contractually or because of criminal activity, do you notify the states?
There are firms that are suspended and debarred from doing business with
And
federal
you do
government
that?
dollars. And we, Mr. Comey can probably speak to this in greater detail, but we make sure that our grantees are aware they need to identify firms that are on that list and not enter into contracts with them.
Okay. Mr. Comey, you mentioned risk assessment and risk management a few times. So these projects had a risk assessment prior to going out, and you sort of alluded to if they were enforced a little bit better, the risk had been managed better, perhaps we
Well, I
wouldn't have run into
mentioned
these
that
overruns.
The FTA on East Side Access had promoted a sort of a executive level risk assessment program that we favor, but like with any of those practices, the details matter in the execution, and it's important to get full cooperation and compliance from MTA on those issues.
MTA
And so-
told me this morning that it was peer-reviewed. They thought it was fairly vigorous. At least the beginning of the risk assessment, how it was enforced, that's seems to be your concern.
It's one only needs eyes to look at the New York projects to appreciate their complexity, but in any of these, it's the plans that identify opportunities for risk, and then you need a recovery plan that not only describes why the cost growth occurs, but tries to come up with a mitigation plan.
And do any of you have an explanation why on so many of these projects, the big projects, and I'm not talking about New York, I'm talking about nationally, the engineers' original estimates tend to be, we have these overruns. So we had in California, we had an English professor from Britain say that in a perfect English accent, he said, we call them strategic misrepresentation, otherwise known as lying. So there is this theory in politics, at least in California, that you wouldn't do these projects if you were more truthful with the original estimate. But that's a double-edged sword, because once you get over budget, the public doesn't trust you anymore. Do you have any thoughts? You've seen a lot of these projects.
You know, I noted earlier that our program has existed for 4 years, and the early years of that program reflected what the professor from England identified. And we still have instances where, at the point we sign the full funding grant agreement, as in these two cases in New York, the projects come in above the budget and after the schedule. And we want to be able to see our project sponsors, our grantees, under promise and over deliver.
Yeah.
So our portfolio today is performing much better than it did, say, 30 years ago. Of the projects we have funded that are active, a number of them are trending below budget and ahead of schedule. These two particular projects are outliers. To be fair, these are the largest transit projects ever undertaken in the country in a very complex construction environment at a time when the contracts were being let in the late 2000s. The market was very hot before the crash. So there are a number of contributing factors to why things are the way they are here. But we have worked very hard. In the last decade, we've put in place a cost and schedule risk assessment process before we make that federal commitment and sign the full funding grant agreement. And that, we think, is one of the contributing factors to the better performance of the projects, adhering to the cost and schedule once we make the federal funding commitment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Maloney?
I want to thank you all for your testimony, but I'd like to ask Mr. Welvers, there's a tremendous gap between what the MTA is telling me and what they're planning with you. They have persistently and consistently said that the groundbreaking would be in December of 2016. So where is the gap, and why is the gap, and why am I hearing a different story than the story they're telling you?
Yeah, when I look at the table that was handed out at the start of the hearing, I look at some of the figures we have. I think some of it's explainable. And I'm also confident that my acting administrator, Therese McMillan, will look very much forward to being here for the opening in December of 2016 with you. That said, what we do on a monthly basis, our FTA oversight team and our oversight contractors, we evaluate the status of the project. And based on the facts we have available, our oversight contractors give us their best informed professional judgment estimate of where the project stands. When we executed the revised full funding grant agreement in March, the schedule is that the project is supposed to open by, let me confirm my figures here, by February of 2018. And that was based on what we agreed to with the MTA. If the MTA can deliver the project sooner, we would be proud to see that happen, right? It looks like the project is trending, based on our data, toward an opening closer to maybe early in sometime in 2017. So the truth is probably somewhere between December of 2016 and our February of 2018 opening date. If the MTA does some of the aggressive schedule management steps that they have planned, they may very well achieve that December date.
Well, I would like to meet with your program
Sure.
manager. And if I could, we're going to be back in Washington this week, and I'd like to know if I could meet with him. My chief of staff is here, Elias, if we can get his name and set up a meeting this week and try to figure this out. What problem that I see is, why are they giving me a different date than the date they're giving you? And if they can have more aggressive steps, I think all of my colleagues would like to see a promised project delivered on time. I think that would build a lot of credibility for everyone. I want to go back to the fraud, waste, and abuse. Was it with which project, or was it both projects? Were both the East Side Connector and the Second Avenue Subway contractors participating in this type of behavior?
I believe they were both were involved, subcontractors.
Okay,
in
yeah.
some crime. It might have been, I can get back to them
You
specifically.
said 221, was that for both or one?
Oh, the overall number on fraud in the New York area? The 201? That involves
All.
all of them.
Do you have
Now-
any numbers for the east side?
I can get you specifics.
Okay.
Now, sometimes you might have a fraud case that where a prime is doing work for both, or maybe multiple projects in the area, so they may be, there may be multiple.
I think we would like to see who those contractors are, and I would suggest that the city bar them from getting contracts in the future from New York State and New York City. Because if you're a proven fraud, why in the world would anyone ever give them another contract? So my question is, when I was on the city council, I literally founded the Committee on Contracts because there was so much abuse. And I passed two important laws, one of which was called Vindex, which required the procurement officers to check the backgrounds of every contractor to see if they were legitimate, if they were legitimate business, their track record on whether they had any actions for fraud, their track record on whether or not they completed their projects as planned, on time, and under budget. But as Mr. Goldstein has pointed out, the MTA is above the city laws. Incidentally, we passed this law in government reform and oversight on the federal level, too, the Vindex system, that you would look at the track record. But the MTA may not be subject to the Vindex system. Do you know if they're subject to the Vindex system? Do you know, Mr. Goldstein?
No, although I do believe, I'm not positive, that the procurement people do check the Vendex submissions that the contractors make to the
They
city.
do for the
but-
city, but I don't think they do
yeah,
for the
I'm
MTA.
not positive, you have to check.
I remember when I was on the city council, I passed the legislation that they had to check the Vindex system for the city, but we never could pass the legislation that the MTA had to. And I think this is an important point for the staff to look into with Mr. Goldstein and Mr. Combs and Mr. Welbs. Is the MTA not subject to the, we create all these authorities, we pass all these city laws, then we create these authorities that get around all of them. So when I left the city council, there was no requirement for the MTA for the Vindex system. And I think that's something that we could do on the federal level for federal money, that it be subject to the Vindex system before it goes forward. I guess my time has expired.
Oh, you can get another quick one in.
Okay, I just want to go back to clarification on why the differences are so much there, and I'd like submitted, if you could, to the chairman, why there's a difference between the projections and what exactly are the proposed speed-up actions that the MTA is projecting that they could still complete this project on time and under budget. What concerns me is that the federal money has been allocated, and the state money, any overrun is going to have to be covered by state money. And if you continue letting this overrun run forward, it's a tremendous problem. And as you know, the federal government goes back and requires that you give back the money if you don't live up to your contract. So this is an important thing. So I just want to get that clarified, and I think I'd like to know how we could be on time. I think it'd be great if we could be on time and under budget for a change. I think that's what this country wants to see. professionalism in contracting and getting the projects done. Anyway, I want to thank the chairman. I've learned a lot. Thank you.
Well, I think our time spent with some of the folks on the projects, the cost overruns, we heard a lot about engineering and design estimates in the beginning, and then the actual cost that came in, that was something we learned from them.
But not for the Second Avenue subway. They were not doing a lot of rewiring
Well,
on that.
proportionally, Second Avenue subway isn't much better than, I mean, East Side Access has doubled that cost, but, and they're also both dramatically behind schedule. So, they're not, again, they're both fraught with problems. And it might be good too sometime for FTA to have a session with some of these folks and bring them in. Actually, anyone else who starts these mega projects, we were talking, Mark and I, about lessons learned, but you have never, in your history, funded anything like this, as you.
These are the two largest
The biggest.
projects. So, for example, since 1992, in president's budgets since 1992, across administrations, we've recommended 88 projects for a full funding grant agreement. All but 6 of those projects reached a full funding grant agreement. So we've signed full funding grant agreements for 82 projects. Today, all those projects are either open and you can ride them, or like a few of them, like East Side Access, Second Avenue Subway, they're under construction. So the overall track record of ultimate project delivery is good. The current portfolio of projects, by and large, is on schedule and within budget. Some of them are actually trending under budget.
But the
These
two biggest
two
ones.
mega projects are outliers
Yeah,
in that
and
portfolio.
again, it's a lesson learned because
Yes.
I think we're facing more mega projects across the country.
It's not just transit.
Right.
Could I ask Mr. Goldstein one more?
Real briefly, and then we'll get to
Okay,
Mr.
yeah.
Sessions.
Would Mayor de Blasio support public-private contracts and projects for high-speed rail, given that the labor protections and labor contracts would be protected and workers would be protected?
Yeah.
One of the problems that we have, and this is a conversation we've had, all of us, particularly with Mr. Sessions, is we need to figure out how to creatively finance things, because we cannot continue running these huge deficits and debt. And so, this is so do you have any sense of where the mayor stands on this issue?
Well, I would say that, where public-private partnerships make sense, they're something that we could support. I mean, for example, the upzoning that's taken place right in this neighborhood is contributing $200 million towards transit improvements. In the prior administration, there was an extension of the number 7 line on the far west side that was done through a value capture of the increased land value of the property that was in the right of way. Something like high-speed rail, I mean, really goes beyond the city. We support regional projects. We think it's they're critical for the city's health, the region's health. Exactly how something like that would be financed, I think, is a question that a lot of people have to look at pretty carefully.
I think we're gonna look for an answer in leadership, because nobody would benefit more from a high-speed rail project than New York City. And we got in the last authorization back with working with Mr. Oversight, provision to set up a Northeast Corridor Commission. It's been in place, it's come up with its recommendation. If New York wants to wait 30 years and expect $152 billion to come in manna from someplace from Washington, it ain't gonna happen.
Right.
But right now, we're gonna do a reauthorization. It'll probably be done by the end of the year. We have a proposal in to bring private money, or at least to see.
Sure.
Just look at the damn proposals and see if someone can do it. They're doing it like she said at the beginning, the rest of
Yeah.
the world. We're sitting here, 83 miles an hour between here and Washington, 68 miles this is a third world Soviet-style train system we're operating in the United States. You don't get many opportunities to open those bills up. We will pass that bill. I know the mayor's new, but he needs to get on the stick with us and speak up, because no one's impacted more than New York's by that. I wasn't gonna get into this, but
No,
you brought
I-
it up. And I'm telling you, that bill will close, and in 5 years, you'll be in the same damn position you're in if somebody doesn't step forward from this city. Boston has a lot at stake, Washington has a
No,
lot at stake.
all the cities do, and I
And
think,
nobody, if we put 10 billion into high-speed rail in this quarter instead of peeing it away in California, no offense.
I'm with you. I agree with you.
The president could be cutting the ribbon on at least part of the thing to move people around. 70%, we heard last night from,
Foy?
Foy, yeah. 70% of the chronically delayed flights that impact Dallas, Fort Worth, one of the biggest airports in the country, Orlando, Florida, San Francisco, they start right here. And nothing is more transformational than
Right.
to get high-speed rail into this corridor where you have all the existing connections and it'll work. So you please bring back.
I will.
You say that Ms. Maloney got Mr. Micah started on this.
Okay.
And I have a proposal, and I'll have it FedEx to his office tomorrow, and I want to hear back. I've had great support from Juliana, I had great support for, what's his name,
Bloomberg.
Yeah.
He helped when we put the commission in place, but now we've got a new mayor and a new opportunity. If this is gonna go out the door, excuse me,
Yeah.
Mr. Sessions, you recognize that.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I think that all three of you recognize that there's a huge demand on each of us as members of Congress, not only to look carefully at the money that we give, but we're in a competitive circumstance also, as regions of the country have their varying needs, whether it be growth or infrastructure problems that they have. We just received 32 trillion gallons of rainwater in Texas in a month, and that placed an incredible strain on our infrastructure. Even though we pray for rain, we quit praying for rain last week. But my point is that I think that what we want to effectively transfer with you is not a displeasure at all. We recognize that you are up against making tough decisions, but rather if we all focus on the same thing, Ms. Maloney is insistent, and I, as a colleague, do understand it. Tell me now, are we going to make that date? Because she's telling lots of people, there are a lot of people making plans on that. Well, it's not always easy to guess. But what I would say is that when you know you're not going to make it, when you see you've got problems, when you back off of something, don't harbor that, don't hide it, don't not make it available. And I just applaud each of you for being here today. You're forthright in your answers. I have reason to believe you would be. But let's stick to this. And we recognize we have our impediments also. Our on again, off again issues are difficult for you. We put each other in the box. I would just make one point, and I don't say this negatively at all, and I don't think you should take it this way, because I don't know which mayor it was, but there's a statement in here on page 4. Despite the billions of dollars the city of New York City has received, the mayor's office has repeatedly asked for more additional funding, including using Twitter accounts and official accounts, in essence, to lobby for more money and get more money. All I can tell you is I think that that's a self-defeating proposition. If anybody has anything to say about that, fine. Not trying to beat each other up, but I think we ought to work closer and closer together for success. I appreciate you being here today, Mr. Chairman. I thank you for allowing me to be here.
Thank you, if anyone well, again, our purpose is to see where you are, where you're going, how we get this done. We all got in this together. It's critically important, not just what I was talking about with high-speed rail, but for the growth of this important city for business, industry, for the national economy. So that's why we're here, and we have a responsibility of oversight, specific oversight of the transportation projects across the country. So I will say that we are coming back. We want to look at Sandy spending. We are coming back, and we
we still haven't made progress on New York airspace redesign. We basically have the equivalent of US 1 coming into New York City. Imagine just US 1 as your only route into New York City, which was 50, 60 years ago, and that's what we have for entering our airspace up here, and that needs to be resolved. It's a national issue and regional issue. And then we're going to go look. There are some good successes. Mentioned Moynihan is very pleased with the success of that. That is going to be an awesome addition to the city. I'm going to take folks over. I brought at least 3 other groups up to look at your traffic management system.
Right.
One of the best in the country. It's absolutely astounding, so cost effective, and some of it is state of the art that we can learn for the rest of the country. Cities like Dallas, cities like San Francisco, they'll see what you've done here. So there's some good news. It's not all tough news. So that's why we're here, why we came, and we really appreciate the 2 federal guys didn't have any choice. But Bill, thank you, and for representing the mayor. And also, your transportation commissioner, we want to also express the willingness to work with her and others.
I will pass that
It's
on.
very important. This is very important.
Absolutely.
I think I did my first hearing, and I think you were there, Ms. Maloney. It was in January, I think the end of January, after I became chairman. And we had a foot of snow and brought about 13 members up to try to launch some of these projects, and some are well underway, and some have a ways to go. But we thank everyone. We will also be submitting some additional questions for those that have joined us today. Any further business? Minority,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
staff? Well, thank you. This
Thank you.
meeting of the Oversight Subcommittee is adjourned. So,